Hi, everyone. Welcome to another broadcast brought to you by Gender Spectrum. Apologies for being a few minutes late. My name is Adam Chang. I am the Community Outreach and Youth Programs Coordinator with Gender Spectrum, and we're so excited to be celebrating March 31st, 2016, Trans Day of Visibility. I have with me Aiden, and Aiden will introduce himself in just a second. Aiden, I'm going to ask you to mute yourself just really quickly.
So,
Uh, and I wanted to open up just with a few announcements that this is a part of Gender Spectrum's online community, The Lounge. We offer broadcasts for teens, parents, for providers all the time. So we definitely invite you to check us out at genderspectrum.org/the lounge. I'm sorry, /lounge. And if you ever miss one of our broadcasts, you can always check out our YouTube page, youtube.com/genderspectrum. So today is March 31st, and it is Transgender Day of Visibility, an international holiday, if you will. It was started back in 2010 by Rachel Crandall, the head of Transgender Michigan. And this project has since been taken on by Trans Student Educational Resources, TSER, since 2013. And so if you want more information, definitely check out TSER. The hashtag and the theme of this year is More Than Visibility, so hashtag More Than Visibility. And the organizers have this to say, that while visibility is important, we must take direct action against transphobia around the world. Visibility, it is not enough to bring transgender liberation. However, we can use visibility as a vital tool for transgender justice. So I think it's really, really awesome that we can be here and celebrate and honor this day with our viewers and audience today. And so we invite you again to, be a part of this movement that's happening right now. And if you go on your social media accounts, use the hashtag TDOV or the hashtag More Than Visibility. So I'm going to ask Aiden to introduce himself, and then we'll get started from there. Aiden, take it away.
all right, for sure. My name is Aiden Castellanos. He, him, his, they, them, their pronouns, whichever works easiest for y'all. I currently live in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, but I'm actually originally from the Bay Area, California, specifically San Bruno. And I'm actually one of the youth council members for Gender Spectrum's Youth Council, and Youth Council as a whole is pretty much our National Youth Council is pretty much a lot of gender expansive youth plus allies that have gotten to work together on different parts of gender spectrum in terms of creating curriculum for our gender spectrum conference and working on the logistics for that, as well as doing a lot more campaigns. So working on the lounge and having us update on different topics that go inside there, and yeah, just some real rad stuff. But yeah.
Thanks, Aiden. And so today's topic is going to examine gender privilege and the impacts that the privileges that come out of gender identity and expression. And what we're going to do, kind of a short outline of what we'll examine in the next few moments, is I'm going to ask Aiden to share a little bit more about his background, his own gender identity and experiences. And I will open up a little bit as well. And then from there, I think we're going to both take a critical lens on our own identities and examine internally, what does it mean to identify the way we identify, to express ourselves the way we express ourselves, and ultimately what sorts of privileges come about and how we can be a bit more conscious of it, so that we are also being aware of how we contribute to creating gender inclusive spaces, and sometimes how our privileges might take up those spaces, right? So I think we want to kind of begin a little bit around, we'll look at vocabulary. We'll definitely look at how patriarchy comes into this. We'll look at who exactly are gender expansive people when we're talking about this concept. And then we'll kind of do an audience Q&A. So audience members, anytime, if you feel like you have a question, you don't have to wait till the end. Go ahead and navigate on your screen. You can click that little blue and white Q&A chat box, and you could submit your questions, and we'll definitely answer those questions towards the end of this broadcast. So let's kind of just start with you, Aiden, and kind of starting with the beginning of your experience. Can you share a little bit more about the stages of your gender? However you identify today, how did you get there? Kind of starting from childhood up until now, just because I still very much view you as a young adult. And so anything you want to open up and share about that?
Yeah, for sure. Okay. So currently I identify as a trans guy. So like, well, the thing was like, well, growing up, I always used to be like kind of a tomboy. So pretty much like just that whole thing where it was like, yeah, I would go over and like play a lot of sports and like be like super like I used to like collect rocks and like collect rocks like from the dirt, like like do like a lot of like outdoorsy sports things, and then like also wear like pretty oversized clothing, like it's that whole thing was like I was perceived as like like that average tomboy that you would have like inside your school, and so that was kind of like me growing up for like the longest time. But like when I finally got like to around like my freshman year of high school, and I was able to go to like a queer youth conference, and that's where I was able to like learn about like, oh, like trans folks, like, and this was something where it's like I really resonated with, like it didn't feel like this was just something where just the way that I like to act, but it's like the way that I almost identify is like me identifying as a man. So I was able to start feeling more comfortable. I was able to like start looking for like different names, and like being able to like feel comfortable with like kind of claiming myself as a guy, specifically a trans guy. And that's when I was able to start feeling more comfortable as like Aiden, and like be able to like show myself like as a trans man, which is something that was like really important for me, like at least being able to have that identity out there. Yeah.
Awesome. And my experience is a little bit differently. I sex assigned at birth was male, and definitely growing up, a young childhood into most of my young adulthood was perceived as a cisgender male. I definitely came out first as gay, and yet something funny happened in that with my family and with their experiences as being immigrants from Asia, they had this misconception that, okay, now Adam's coming out as gay. Is he also telling us that he wants to transition into a woman? And so, like, shortly after, the questions came up from my dad, from my grandparents, of, well, does this mean you want to be a woman now? And my answer was no. And then if time goes on, I came out about almost 15 years ago with my sexual orientation, but I also noticed that my family started treating me a little bit differently, and that they sometimes would use some feminine qualities when talking to me in Cantonese language and whatnot. And I think it became apparent in the roles that I took on in my family as an older sibling, but really a caretaker of like the little kids, and changing the diapers and feeding time and all of that. And they started seeing me in this position of kind of holding both a male and female type of role. And so lo and behold, sometimes now, kind of jokingly and yet like this half-truth scenario of people in my family and elders in my family addressing me with feminine or female titles. And I kind of have really embraced it, that I really do identify now today when it comes to my gender identity. I feel like I just fall in the middle, and I tell people that you can use she or he pronouns to address me. My family does it, and they do it quite respectfully. And so I definitely open the public to do that as well. So I do want to bring up another question, Aiden, of in any of the stages of coming to who you know yourself to be today, was there ever an instant where you felt kind of otherized or felt outcasted?
So yeah, I mean, like growing up, like with my childhood. I mean, like definitely me being a tomboy was kind of like just it was like kind of like that easy target to like, kind of like bully someone. So there were like a few times when like it's yeah like things would end up happening to me. I end up like there were a lot of slurs being thrown at me like growing up, like starting like from elementary school. I like one time I got beat up really badly by like a few of these people that I thought were my friends I used to play soccer with. I mean, it was hard really like growing up with just like not really sure of anything that was going on, but it got like it had been a problem. And I mean, once I came out as trans, like I to what extent that really like improved the situation, not really much. I mean, or it was intense. I mean, like as soon as I came out as trans, like the whole time I was just thinking, oh man, I don't know if I can like tell my mom this. Like, like I come from like a Mexican household, so with that, we it's not necessarily really talked about. I mean, like that's always something that can always just put you at risk of anything. And I always hear the story of like, yeah, like like trans folks have like a really high chance of like becoming homeless, and that was something that I like really feared for myself. Or it's like even just being like rejected by my family. But I mean, even at school, like there was always that time where it's like I went over and called myself Aiden, and other people would still like call me by my birth name, or like other people would like start using like she, her pronouns towards me, even though I asked them not to. And then it just, I mean, like the worst was, yeah, like there has been times when like, again, like violence had been done, like in terms of like transphobic acts of violence um, towards me because of the way that I identified. And like that's something that and it's something that I can still like pretty much still say that I'm pretty fearful of like this happening again. And like, the more and more reports that happen, it definitely comes to a place for me where it's always like on guard. So it's like definitely a lot of being trans was always something where it's like, yeah, like you always will be otherized because of this identity, or at least that's how I always had felt like. So yeah.
I want to kind of touch on that experience when you kind of you just shared that when you were younger, expressing more as a tomboy. And I don't know if you identified as a tomboy before you kind of came out as trans, but what did you feel like you were being targeted and picked on because you were a tomboy, because you express yourself with more masculine traits and qualities? Because I think oftentimes we do hear that there's like generally broader acceptance for girls who can be more masculine of center, behave more athletic or sporty, or dress in a way that's typically stereotypically masculine, right? And so could you just share a little bit more about what that experience was?
Yeah, for sure. So pretty much like I did identify like as a tomboy. I'm guessing because probably that might have been like the only vocabulary accessible for me at the time. So that was probably like one of the only ways that I really could like identify if I wanted to go over and give myself an identity. But definitely, I mean, like a lot of the cases, it was like it's pretty much because like there were like I had like some people that would go over and be like, oh wow, look at that, like look at her, like wow, like really able to throw like a football really well, and like able to like just really hold themselves like in classrooms and like be able to talk like so well. And I'm just and like there was those cases, but then the other cases in terms of like when it got like really bad, it was like, oh, what are you doing, like trying to be here? Oh, if you're going to be one of the guys, then we're going to treat you like one of the guys. Or there's always going to be like a mixed bag, because yes, there's always going to be like a lot of saying like you're going to get like a lot of praise for like being presented as masculine, which does happen, because it's like, yes, like as a trans guy, like I can say like but I do benefit, like I am privileged because of like the whole system of patriarchy in the US. However, I can also say that there are experiences of transphobia that I faced because of my trans identity.
Yeah, and if I were to look back on my own childhood experience as well, I went to a Christian school up until the sixth grade, and um, I knew I wasn't like other boys. I wasn't yet at all exploring my sexuality, and yet looking back now, although again I didn't have, like you said, the terminology accessible available to me yet at that point, I looking back, I could definitely say that people noticed that I wasn't as boyish as I should have been. And I definitely was not the athletic kid. I was, classic scenario of last to be picked for the kickball team, the football team, the soccer team, whatever team it was for the sport of the day. And and yet, I think while I was feeling a little bit left out, I what really kind of stood out for me looking back on my childhood experience was I had a friend, his name is Jed, and he really kind of stood up for me in a way that I don't even know if he realized the impact it had, and that he was really seen as the kind of macho athletic boy in our school, and for him to befriend me, to play with me during recess. We would share snacks and food together. And I think it kind of, in a way, ended up allowing me to feel inclusive. And I don't know, I doubt Jed is watching this, and I doubt Jed ever will. And yet he really did step up as an ally in a way that he probably wasn't even aware of at that time, for us as 9, 10-year-olds, right? And and so I definitely want to share that as well, that sometimes we might have these feelings of being outcasted or otherized, and yet really when it comes to people who are just simply being your friend because they find unique qualities and aspects about you that they can identify with, it can lead to huge emotional abundance of support. Yeah. Should we do another question, Aiden?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, still reflecting on kind of at any stages of your life, even now, let's delve into this concept of privilege a little bit more. Like, what specific examples of privilege do you notice coming up? And maybe if you can share a couple and I can share a couple, and then we can just comment on one another's examples.
So, well, yeah, so pretty much I don't know. I think that I've at least talked with my other friends about this, and my voice has always been pretty loud. But once I started testosterone, it got really loud. But I don't know. It definitely it definitely can have that ability to go over and make a real because it makes a really loud presence in the room sometimes. And sometimes I feel I get really worried. I just get really self-conscious, and I notice that they'll go over and they'll give me more time. Some people will go in the room will give me more time to speak, in terms of just not just going over and listening to what I say more, and going over and commenting on my things more than some of my than more than some of my cis women friends do. It's, I don't know, you can definitely see there's a difference in the way where it's I go over and I say something and it gets commented and validated, and it kind of goes off. Whereas for some of my friends who are cis girls, cisgender girls, so women, people who were assigned female at birth that identify as women, they go over and they talk, and then sometimes it doesn't go much farther than there. But I mean, that's just one of the easy cases that I can just think of right now. But yeah.
Yeah, a really obvious one for me was I'm the oldest of 10 younger siblings. I have 10 younger siblings that range from 8 months old to 28 years old. And for my family, for my sex assigned at birth to be male, and for my dad to be the only son, and for his dad to be the only son, it ended up being this genealogy of patriarchy. That in our culture and in our family, being the oldest son and definitely being the firstborn son, it carries a level of responsibility. It definitely carries a certain title, and it comes with certain privileges. It's just I think age aside, even if I wasn't the oldest, but if I had an older sister, for example, but I ended up being the first, birth son, that maybe at the end of the day, sometimes my words and words hold a lot of power, might ultimately trump this fictional older sister, right? And still kind of these expectations by other family members, cousins, aunts, uncles, that I'm supposed to represent the Chang family in a certain way. And again, when you're out at weddings, out at any like public spaces in which the community can recognize who the family is, then people are speaking to me first, and they're acknowledging me first before they might do anyone else. And I really do have to check myself to see, like, I understand that this is a cultural practice, it's a cultural construct and a cultural norm, and yet, how do I want to be aware of it and in some instances challenge it? What do I want to do to make sure that my younger sister, but who is the oldest sister, is uplifted in her voice and her actions as well, right? That she's not always kind of just behind me in my shadow or whatever, because I don't want that. And I know she wouldn't want that either. So I definitely have, been conscious in my role as an older sibling, trying to make sure that I'm constantly making sure that all my siblings, while they're younger than me and are at different stages of development and maturity in their life, they're standing with me kind of as equals, that gender shouldn't have too much of an impact on how people view them and treat them with respect and whatnot. Do you have another example you want to open up about?
Is it okay if I can go over and like talk a little bit more about yours? So yeah, so like actually, so in terms of like wanting to be able to like kind of create like an equal standing between like you and your family members, like how would you go over and push that? Like how can you push for that?
Yeah, it's definitely making sure and checking in with my siblings, especially my sisters, and letting them know, like, if a certain scenario happened where this uncle over here or this great auntie over here said something that kind of to me sounded a little bit sexist or misogynistic, it's like, did you just hear that? And how did that make you feel? And sometimes sometimes it's just creating that space to have a real talk with them, and knowing that they can always turn to me, that I don't always have to be the one to initiate that conversation of like, gosh, that was just really awkward to experience and witness, that they could also come to me and do that. I think I've done a good job of setting a pattern and a habit that they know they could do that with me, to open up with me in that way. I think sometimes it's also checking myself and being aware that, okay, am I shutting down a younger sibling because I'm pulling out the older sibling card, or is it a gender card, right? So I'm kind of checking myself in my mind that way as well. And I want to say more often than not, it's the age thing and not the gender thing. But I hope that the siblings could always call me out if they needed to. And I think more so right now, it's the sibling right after me who's also cisgender male, who maybe calls me and checks me out most frequently, just because we're so close in age and we live together and all that. Yeah. But back to you. Do you have another example you'd like to share with us?
Well, yeah, sure. So pretty much this is another one from like back home. But in terms of just like, it was really weird. I remember like, it's something where I became like less and less aware of, but I was visiting back for like winter break, and I was out with one of my friends from like back home. And so it was like getting really late, like I think like 2 in the morning, and like we were about to take like public transportation back home. And like, since like we were walking like in a really dark area, like she was really concerned of just like about like her own safety. But like I realized like, wait, wow, like this is something that I actually didn't really was scared of. Like, I don't know, for me I just felt like so comfortable. Like I've been out like late at night like for a lot of times, and it's just something where it's like, oh, I like usually ended up forgetting like, yeah, that this is something that it's a matter of like me having to check myself like constantly, because this is something, again, like it's something that I go over and talk about so often, but it's still something where it's just like, if it doesn't happen that often, like, yeah, you're gonna end up forgetting about it. And I ended up like, I was just worried about like one of my friends. I was just worried about my friend, because it was like, yeah, like she was terrified. Like it was really late. Like we were the only ones like we were the only two walking home, like walking around like in Oakland. So like it was something where it was like, oh well, you know, it was just like a check for me where I was just like, yeah, like shit, that's right. Like this is something where I need to realize where it's like, yeah, I've totally forgotten about like how prevalent this is and how often like people just like how often kind of how often I can easily forget about it. Like can go over and like pass as a cis guy now, and like I have been mistaken for a cis guy, and like with testosterone, but it's still something that again like it can just really easily like be ignored. It was an interesting thing, but. Mm-hmm.
Well, you definitely reminded for me, this is literally 2 weeks ago as I was picking up my sister who is currently a student at UC Berkeley in Northern California. And like I'm picking her up from school campus. Her apartment is just blocks away from the campus. And she says, yeah, we just got a notice of like 3 sexual assaults like within the past month or two. And I'm like, that's freaking ridiculous. And here I am now, and the sister that I've really tried to help empower and build up, and definitely did a lot of like shared responsibility and parenting to get her where she is today. And I'm having these real talks with her about, how do you be safe, and how do you be safe in a world and in the Bay Area, which is supposed to be this safe, progressive, open bubble. How do you still be aware of your surroundings, and am I sounding sexist now? Am I sounding like this overbearing male figure telling her what she needs to do so that she can be safe and how to live her life, right? And I don't want to do that. And yeah, I have to balance that out with like the fact that these assaults literally happen within a half-mile radius of where you live, right? And I'm a new parent now too. I have a 9-month-old baby, sex assigned at birth female, and it's just being conscious of like, how again, like as a new parent and with this new human being in my life, like how can I help her just truly come to terms with who she is and still be safe out in this world?
I think like at least for me, it's I don't know there's like a lot of really touchy things, and like I'm really like even still to this day like unsure how to go over and address it. And like with me, it's like at least with all the activism that I've done in the past, it's all been like a form of empowerment. Like yes, I can go over and be proud of my Mexican identity. Yes, I can still be proud of like my trans identity. But the thing is, it's still like I do have like a privilege of being a man, like of being being like male perceived in this space. So I don't know, like a matter of like trying to go over and like even out like a lot of the different intersecting identities. And not only that, like how really can you go over and like find the balance between not being overbearing on someone else versus like for your so yeah, not being overbearing on someone else and reminding yourself to like check yourself, because this isn't necessarily something where it's like everything on, but also like how can you go over and give the right amount of support? How can you go over and like be a good ally for like women, for non-binary folks, for people who are feminine perceived, even if they are like trans guys? I mean, like there's so many different there's such a different spectrum of being like a male perceived person. And so like how can we go over and address that? Yes, it's definitely a ride, and it's definitely like something where it's like I still need to go over and work on this. And not only that, like how like this is always going to be like a call out for other folks, because like patriarchy does work in my favor, and like transphobia can still happen, but I want to be able to hear like more from others, like what can I do to like be a better ally? Like what can I exactly do to like go over and not just like acknowledging my own privilege, but like be someone that can be there in terms of like like just being in the space in general. There's a lot of different things, but yeah, it's forgotten.
Well, I definitely hope that, I hope that there are many takeaways that people are taking from this conversation, but I really, really do want to highlight and emphasize what you just brought up of like feminine identity. um, it's such a huge spectrum in and of itself, and you gave some really great examples of whether you're a cisgender woman, whether you're a trans woman, whether you're feminine perceived but in fact a trans man, gender fluid and still perceived as female, all of these things, right? And how important it is for us to still continue that conversation of, and rightly so, especially on Trans Day of Visibility, of the attacks and assaults of trans women of color, that with more visibility, with media and politicians being more vocal and outspoken of gender in general, and definitely trans issues, trans policies, and trans laws, that it does open up a floodgate of more conversations, but sometimes conversations that are really hostile in nature, that lead people to act irrationally and violently towards our trans sisters. And so, yeah.
And not only that, like there's certain way, like you go over and you look at some of the responses that are happening to like the thing with like North Carolina, and how like there had been like trans guys going over to like women's restrooms and being like male passing trans guys going over to women's restrooms and like taking a picture, like taking selfies and like saying like, oh, does it look like I belong here? And like even that itself can like go over and create a problem, because it's still like it goes over and it gives that privilege for passing trans guys, but again, like for everyone else, like for folks who are non-binary, doesn't necessarily fit inside either, don't exactly fit inside either, and like don't have like a gender neutral space to go to. Or just in terms of people who don't pass, I mean, like a lot of this, like a lot of the bill was due to like was a lot of it was targeted and like in terms of being hateful and fearful towards non-passing trans women in like women's restrooms. So like there's a huge problem going on, and like saying like, oh yes, we should only care about like cis women's feelings like in terms of like this bill, and like we should like only like appeal to certain things. And like sometimes like the counter argument for it is like, oh, you don't want like passing trans people to be inside like the wrong restroom. And it's that's why there's so many different nuances, and being able to find a way to go over and like address it efficiently to the point where it's like, no, yes, like this is going to be like an issue that affects like all trans people, because like sometimes it's only saying like, oh, a certain amount of trans, like only passing trans folks matter more than other trans folks, and like there's a lot of, again, like, yeah.
Yeah, so I want to take a beat, and I want to remind the audience that they can submit questions and simply navigate the screen, click the Q&A box, submit your questions, and we could answer them live and now. And maybe while we're buying some time, Aiden, how about you go ahead and show us what you have wearing around your neck?
Yeah, folks. All right, so here, this is just like a trans flag. It's really cute. I really like it. There you go. It's a nice one. But no, yeah, for like TDOV, like TDOR, for a lot of like trans or queer events, I like wearing it. It's for me, for like, it's like a sense of pride, because like I am still very proud of like my trans identity. It's just like, again, like it's always a good thing to just like have this as like myself, or like just, or yeah, I don't know. I really like it. Also, it's cute.
Awesome. So there is a question here. It's how can we use our privileges to contribute to gender justice? It's a pretty broad and open question, but if you have one or two specific advice you want to share with us, Aiden. So again, it's how can we use our privileges to contribute to gender justice?
I'm guessing it really depends on like what exactly is the space that like, what exactly is the space that you're in? I mean, like if there's going to be conversations talking about like gendered violence, like I remember like there was one happening like over at my school, and like I ended up going, but like my participation there was more of like an active listener than an actual like participant, or an active listener more than actually like going over and starting to talk things. And like one of the other examples is also like mansplaining. Like there's no reason for like us to go and like for us to like go over and have to explain like something that like a woman just said. Like a woman went over and she just made her opinion, like made her statement. Like that's something where, you know, what really is it for us to be able to like go over and talk over them, go over and explain what they just said? I mean, like it's something where it's their experience, and like again, it makes me uncomfortable. And even me, like, you know, like there's even like how some people can go over and like target like our broadcast for like being a little bit problematic, because it's like us are both like, because both of us are like male perceived folks, so like, you know, even that itself can go over and like cause a problem. So it's like checking privilege in like every single way. I mean, like that is something that needs to happen. I'm guessing just be more conscious of it. But I mean, like also it's not necessarily like also like a like for someone who's like feminine perceived or non-binary, or like anyone else who's like not male perceived, to have to go over and like ask folks, but also just like go over and like we can search it up on like Google too. I mean, like there's so many examples of like just the types of privileges that we face, so that way we can at least be a bit more conscious of it, because it's like our job is to like be able to learn and then like learn from others what can we do. So yeah, that's another thing.
Yeah, when you were you said mansplaining, it reminded me of something. But before I jump to that, yeah, it's really also just being aware of always constantly space you take up, like whether it's the verbal space, whether it's the physical space, and so one thing I recall is like, I don't know if it was just last year and maybe a couple years before that even, but like there would be photos on social media of guys who are sitting in public transportation, on buses, on trains, whatnot, and just like their legs would be so widespread, and you're essentially, it's so widespread that you're even taking up 2 seats, and it's like it's guys who do this, and you know, there's so many guys who try to justify for why they sit in that position, and yet it's essentially that. Like if you put a metaphorical picture to what is gender privilege and what does it mean to have gender justice, it's like, don't take up space that you don't need. Don't do it because it's comfortable for you. Don't do it because you feel like you're entitled to it. It's like you really only need that seat, and it's not saying that, you know, if you're fighting for justice and equality, it's not saying that you can't have your own seat, and it's not saying, you know, you should give up your seat. It's just saying, just always be conscious that you're not doing something that's kind of invading someone else's seat, right? I hope that analogy made a little bit of sense. Yeah, okay. One more tip you want to share, and then maybe we can close out?
Yeah, I mean, like again, I think it's for like for folks who are like, it's, I just really hope that like for gender expansive folks who are able to be like male perceived, that this is something that like we can all like start taking like a collective consciousness of, because again, like transphobia does affect us, like that is a thing, but in terms of how, but like also patriarchy does work in our favor. Like that is just a statement of fact, where it's like being able to notice that we can be disenfranchised in some ways and privileged in others, and like this combination of like of our intersecting identities can go over and like be a struggle. But one of the things with like us being more aware of it means that we can like better work towards being able to dismantle like the different forms of oppression that are happening. So yeah.
I think that's great. So just to recap, folks, we hope that you, well, thank you for being a part of this conversation, for viewing and watching this. If you liked it, please share it. Definitely subscribe to the Gender Spectrum YouTube channel, because we will have videos and more broadcasts coming up throughout the next several weeks and months, and hopefully years to come. And we again invite you to join us on our online community, genderspectrum.org, slash lounge. We have over 1,100 members now, teenagers, parents, professional service providers. So definitely check it out and come get connected. Many, many deep thanks to you, Aiden, for being sharing this space with me today, for opening up about your own experiences and definitely sharing your words of wisdom. Do you have any final words you want to add?
Oh, this is on for mine. Wow, my bad. I totally didn't notice. Sorry about that. No, but yeah, just wanted to say thank you for also giving me this opportunity. And I'm really glad that like other folks were able to watch in on this. And also like if there were any things that like we can always like go over and like continue this discussion. So yeah, just go over and like join the lounge with Gender Spectrum so that we can go over and like contact like either of us, so that way like, you know, if there's anything more that y'all want to have like conversations with or discussions more, like definitely it'd be rad. So yeah.
Yay, thank you, Aiden. Have a good one. Take care.
All right, you take care. See you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.